Most people don't wake up one morning and decide to be bad with money, and yet so many people live with this constant, quiet shame that maybe they missed some lesson everyone else passed. Because no matter how hard they work, no matter how careful they try to be, money keeps leaking out faster than it comes in. Emergencies feel catastrophic instead of inconvenient, and life feels like a treadmill that speeds up every year. If that's you, the exhaustion you feel isn't laziness, it isn't irresponsibility, and it isn't a character flaw. It's the feeling of running an economic race where the ground beneath you costs money to stand on. When you're poor, every decision is heavier, every mistake is louder, and every delay is more expensive. You don't get buffers, you don't get grace periods, and you definitely don't get discounts for trying your best. You get fees, you get penalties, you get interest, and the most frustrating part is that from the outside, it looks like bad choices, but from the inside, it feels like being charged extra just for existing. That feeling of always being one step behind, of fixing one problem only to create another, is not random, it's personal, it's mathematical, and once you see the math, you realize something unsettling. Poverty isn't just a lack of money, it's a system where money itself becomes more expensive the less you have. Imagine two people standing at the same starting line, but one of them has to pay rent just to stay there, while the other earns interest for waiting. That's the hidden reality most people never explain, because we're taught to see money as a moral issue instead of a mechanical one. But money doesn't care about effort. It responds to structure, and the structure of poverty is designed to compound losses the same way wealth compounds gains. Let's slow this down and put it on the whiteboard. Forget motivation, forget discipline, forget budgeting apps for a moment. Let's talk about cost over time. Say you need a pair of work boots. The cheap boots cost less up front, so you buy them because that's what you can afford. They wear out in 6 months. The expensive boots cost more up front, but they last 5 years. Over time, the cheap boots cost more. This is often explained as common sense. That explanation misses the brutal part. The issue isn't that the poor don't understand the math. The issue is that the math demands upfront capital to unlock lower long-term costs. This is known as the Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness, and it applies to almost everything: housing, transportation, food, healthcare, education, even time itself. When you're poor, you buy in fragments. When you're rich, you buy in bulk. Bulk is cheaper. Fragments are expensive. The poor pay retail for life, while the rich buy wholesale. A gallon of milk costs less per ounce than a small bottle, but only if you can afford the gallon and have a fridge big enough to store it. A used car with problems costs less today, but more in repairs, lost work hours, and stress than a reliable car bought with cash. Paying monthly costs more than paying once, but monthly payments are the only option when cash doesn't exist. This is not bad planning. This is constrained math, and constrained math punishes delay, uncertainty, and fragility. When every dollar is already assigned to survival, there is no room to optimize. You're not choosing the best option. You're choosing the least immediately painful one. Now let's talk about fees, because this is where the system quietly extracts money from people who can least afford to lose it. Overdraft fees, late fees, minimum balance penalties, interest on short-term debt, higher insurance premiums, higher borrowing costs, prepaid services instead of postpaid ones, pay-as-you-go utilities, rent-to-own furniture, check cashing fees. None of these exist to serve people with money. They exist because not having money is treated as risk, and risk is monetized. When you're poor, you pay extra for trust. You're charged more because the system assumes you're more likely to fail, and then those charges make failure more likely. This creates a feedback loop where one missed payment triggers a cascade of costs that have nothing to do with the original purchase. A single late fee can snowball into account closures, credit score damage, higher interest rates, and fewer options next time. Wealthy people make mistakes too, but their mistakes are cushioned by liquidity. They pay a fee and move on. Poor people absorb the fee as trauma. The emotional weight of money mistakes becomes heavier than the financial one because each mistake threatens stability itself. This is why financial stress feels like panic instead of inconvenience. The margin for error is razor thin. This brings us to time, the most underrated currency in economics. Poor people don't just have less money, they have less flexible time. Time spent fixing problems, waiting in lines, negotiating bills, commuting longer distances, managing breakdowns, dealing with paperwork, recovering from exhaustion. All of this time has a cost, but it's not accounted for in traditional financial advice. When you're rich, time is leverage. When you're poor, time is consumed by maintenance. Every inefficiency becomes a tax. A broken appliance isn't just a repair cost, it's time off work, transportation logistics, stress, and sometimes job risk. This is why telling people to just side hustle often misses reality. Side hustles require spare energy, predictable schedules, upfront tools, and recovery time.
Poverty compresses the present so tightly that the future never gets oxygen. The poor live in a constant state of short-term optimization, not because they're impulsive, but because the system rewards immediate survival over long-term planning. This is scarcity economics, and it changes how the brain works. When resources are scarce, the mind narrows its focus. Decision-making becomes reactive. Long-term trade-offs become harder to calculate. This isn't a mindset issue. It's a cognitive response to sustained pressure. Now, zoom out and look at the system itself. Ask a simple question. Who benefits when money is expensive for the poor? The answer is not abstract. Entire industries are built around extracting value from financial fragility. High-interest lending, subscription-based necessities, rental dependency, asset inflation, credit scoring models that punish instability, housing markets that reward ownership and penalize renting, education systems that require debt to access opportunity. None of these systems are accidents. They are incentives aligned around capital accumulation. Wealth generates leverage. Leverage reduces costs. Reduced costs accelerate wealth. Poverty does the opposite. It removes leverage, increases costs, and slows recovery. This is why inequality widens even when everyone works harder. The slope of the hill is different. One side rolls downhill. The other climbs with weights attached. And because the system frames outcomes as personal responsibility, the emotional burden is shifted onto individuals. Shame becomes a distraction. As long as people blame themselves, they don't question the architecture. Understanding this isn't about removing accountability. It's about assigning it accurately. You are responsible for navigating the system, but you are not responsible for designing it. And no amount of discipline can fully overcome structural math. That doesn't mean there's no exit. It means the exit is strategic, not moral. The goal is not perfection. The goal is reducing exposure to expensive money. Every step that reduces fragility increases leverage. Liquidity is more important than returns at first. Stability beats optimization. Avoiding fees often matters more than earning interest. Predictability is wealth before wealth. This might look like prioritizing emergency buffers over investing, choosing boring stability over high-risk upside, consolidating obligations to reduce mental load, protecting credit not for status, but for access. The first phase out of poverty is not growth, it's insulation. It's creating space where one mistake doesn't collapse everything. And that space, however small, changes how time feels, how decisions feel, how the future becomes visible again. The final truth is uncomfortable but freeing. Being poor is expensive because the system prices risk onto those least able to absorb it. Once you see that, the shame dissolves. The struggle makes sense. The exhaustion has a cause. And while no single video can dismantle the system, understanding the math lets you stop blaming yourself for outcomes that were statistically stacked against you. Awareness doesn't fix everything, but it changes where you apply your energy. You stop chasing shortcuts and start building buffers. You stop internalizing failure and start recognizing friction. And slowly, deliberately, the cost of being you begins to go down. Not because you worked harder, but because you learned how the system charges you and how to minimize its reach.